Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. My name is Alan Searcy. I am the American Historian. Glad you guys are with me today. Hey, Christmas is right around the corner. I think the resurrection of Knox Martin, my new Frankenstein book, would fit perfectly in a stocking right there on your mantle. You also gift wrap it and stick it under the tree. It would look great. Anyway, hey, wherever you're listening to, make sure you subscribe. Leave us a review. Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Google, wherever you find us. Yeah, leave us a review. Subscribe. Also, follow me on Twitter at ATOAllen. ATOALLEN. Type in my name, Alan Searcy. I'm dropping ghost stories on Twitter. I usually do 2 a day. A lot of fun. Please give me a follow. Also, Southern Ghost Stories, Instagram, Facebook. Be sure you follow us on there. Leave us, send us a message. Send us some questions. I'm going to do a Q&A here in a few months. I love doing Q&As because I do a lot of traveling. Been to a lot of crazy places. Got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. So today, last week we were in Madison, or the last show we was in Madison, Wisconsin. Today, heading back south, Houston, Texas. Now, I went to Houston several years ago for a UFC fight, and that was a blast. And ate like a king, and I fell in love with the town and its history. So if you know me, I had a book about Houston. It came out back in June, I believe. Not about Houston, the city, but Sam Houston, the city's namesake. It's actually it's a romance novel. I'm kind of like Nicholas Sparks over here. I write ghost stories, folklore, tales of cryptids and grave robbing. But yeah, I've got a romance novel. It's called The First Lady of Tennessee. But yeah, it's about Sam Houston, how he was the governor of Tennessee. He got married. The girl left him, and he went out west. It's a crazy, crazy story. But yeah, it's fun. I think guys enjoy it too. But yeah, check that out, The First Lady of Tennessee. But anyway, that's a really weird segue. So Houston, Texas. So there's a lot of history in Houston, a lot of good ghost stories, and just a lot of weird, wild stuff. There's weird stuff everywhere. Talking about the last show, Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin. You wouldn't think it's this little small college town has all this crazy stuff going on, but yeah, it's everywhere. So one of the Rice Hotel, and the Rice Hotel down there in Houston, it's a massive downtown landmark. It's been there for over a century, and it's hosted balls and political events, since 1913. But on November 21st, 1963, President John F. Kennedy and his wife, Jackie, they spent the night together. The next day they got up and they went to Dallas. Of course, you guys know November 22nd, 1963, that's when he got shot. So according to legend, when he stayed there at the hotel, he ordered caviar, champagne, and even his favorite beer was delivered to the room. So he was living it up there in Houston. So the next day, as you know, he was gunned down as he rode through downtown Dallas by Lee Harvey Oswald. Or maybe it was someone else. That's another story. That's another podcast. There's plenty of podcasts that go into the JFK assassination and whether, it was Oswald or somebody else. I don't really know. It's a weird, wild story and lots of different theories on that. I won't even try to get into it. But let's back up. So I told you guys JFK, he stayed at the Rice Hotel in downtown Houston the night before he died. Well, it was the site of the Capitol Hotel previously, and originally there was a really wild story that came out of there. William Marsh Rice was the owner of the hotel. One of the wealthiest guys in Houston, to be honest with you. Well, he went to New York City in 1900, and he died suddenly, mysteriously. He was poisoned by his valet and an attorney. They had this plot to forge his will and steal his fortune. And the hotel there, that was one of his largest assets. After his death, this crazy sensational trial exposed the plot, and the property was then transferred to Rice, which is, Rice University, the big college down there in Houston, and it was renamed the Rice Hotel. But, aside from that crazy murder plot, there's also a lot of eerie legends there. Today, the building, they're called the Rice Lofts. Residents report strange phenomena. They say it's usually on the upper floors near the old presidential suite in the grand ballroom. People have experienced cold spots. They feel doors and even their beds rattling at night. I don't know about you. If I'm laying in a bed and it starts rattling, I'm gonna jump out of that thing and see if the AC kicked on or try to figure out what's going on. But in addition to that, they seen full apparitions walking around the room dressed in like older attire. They say that in the ballroom, they seen people dancing, like people dressed up in old, like early 20th century attire, dancing together in these ballrooms. I actually heard something similar to that in Castaic Springs, Tennessee. There's a mineral springs resort called Wynwood. And a guy told me he was walking through the back part of the house. And he kind of looked in one of the doors that was open, and he saw this ball, like a party taking place. These people dressed in older attire, dancing and laughing. And he looked again, they were all gone. So I've heard of that phenomenon before. So it's just wild. It's going on down there in Houston as well. So another really wild story I dug up. The old Houston Public Library, it's now called the Julia Ideson Building. Well, it was built in 1926, Spanish Renaissance building, and it was, like I said, the former main branch for the Houston Public Library. And they say that there was a library, he lived there, he's like a caretaker of the library. Back in the early 20th century, it wasn't uncommon for people to live in these buildings to take care of them. The guy's name was Jacob Kramer, and that was his life. He took care of the library. He had a little dog, a little German Shepherd, Petey, a little puppy. And at night, once the library shut down, he would go upstairs, and they say he would play his violin. And he loved, like, playing the violin in those quiet, echoing halls. I'm sure the acoustics were off the charts, in an empty building like that. But that's what he'd do at night once everything shut down. Well, they say that years later, Jacob, he never left. They say the library staff and people who are there clean up late at night, they'll hear the faint, beautiful strains of violin music echoing through the upper floors and the third floor gallery where the building is supposed to be entirely empty. And what's even crazier, they say that you hear the music and you hear the violin, you hear a clicking, like of dog's toenails clicking on the marble floors. And they say that's Jacob's little puppy Petey, just following his master on this eternal silent security rounds that he does even today. So yeah, that's wild. There's a lot of debate on whether animals can have ghosts or spirits. What's the saying? All dogs go to heaven. I've also heard all cats go to hell. So who really knows? But I've heard of several instances where, like, dogs, their spirits remain. I know when I worked on my Franklin book, I heard a story about they would hear kind of the same thing. They would hear the puppy running down the hallway that died in the house. So who knows? But it's kind of sweet that the Jacob and his little puppy there are still hanging out, taking care of the library even today. So another story I found I thought was really fun. The old Jefferson Davis Hospital. It's now the Elder Street Artist Loft. It was built in 1924, and it was built directly on top of Houston's first municipal cemetery. It was a potter's field. So I think I've told you guys before, a potter's field, you know what it is. It's like a pauper's burial ground. You see these lavish, like in Nashville, Mount Olivet, these lavish, like St. Bonaventure and Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, these huge, large, ornate headstones with angels and marble figures. It's beautiful how they do them. Well, a lot of folks couldn't afford all that. So if you just getting by day to day and you pass away, your family ain't got much money, they'll lay you to rest in a potter's field. It's where the poor people go. Sometimes they, like if there's a yellow fever or cholera or whatever, they'll throw everybody in a pit. But usually a potter's field, they lay to rest in a simple pine box. Well, that's where they built this hospital. They say it contained the remains of Confederate soldiers, victims of yellow fever epidemics. And although efforts were made to relocate all the bodies, like I was talking about last week in the Madison episode, sometimes they miss them. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a huge area. You know, they're combing, if they're digging down, 8 feet deep, what if someone was buried 10 foot deep? It's just, and what if someone's buried way over here that they don't see? So who knows? But they say that they didn't get everybody. And they built this building on possibly thousands of disturbed graves. Who knows? So the grim foundation combined with the suffering occurred in the hospital, because it was a psychiatric hospital too. It's created this epicenter of paranormal activity. For years the building was abandoned. Even when the building was abandoned, they would hear, teenagers, to rite of passion, they're going to break into this creepy old hospital. They hear screaming, moaning, crying, and they say is believed to come from both former patients, and sometimes even staff members. Who knows what's going on with that? But shadowy figures of nurses, soldiers, and even children were sighted by kids who would break into the old hospital and go investigate late at night. Well, even today, now that it's been renovated into these loft apartments, it's kind of like the same dark energy remains. They're seeing the same thing, seeing shadow figures, or seeing apparitions of soldiers, children playing in the hallway. Kind of like most ghost stories, when you walk up to them, they disappear. So, you got to think that even a hospital, aside from the whole cemetery and the paupers thing, hospitals are insanely haunted. I've written a bunch of books and I've done a lot of investigating. Hospitals, there's ghost stories in a lot of hospitals because a lot of people die there. If you pass away suddenly, and where are you going to go? I mean, maybe you go home, maybe you stay where you're at, you're confused. I don't really know how it all works, but there's reports of a lot of hospitals where there's a lot of ghostly activity. So, now it's artist loft apartments. I mean, I guess they've stuck around there too. So another cemetery story I found in Houston. Actually, it's in Crosby, which is, a few miles outside of Houston. I guess it's like the suburbs of Houston. There was a subdivision built, and I think it was in the 1980s. And 100 years ago, there was a big plantation. It's called the Black Hope Plantation. They had slaves on site. So what happens is, these big plantations in the 1880s, 1870s, whatever, as the years go by, the families, they die off, or the family sells the property to developers. Developers are looking for big plots of land, and these plantations have a lot of it. So what happens is the descendants of the plantation owners and the upper crust families who own these farms and plantations, they sell them, they cash out. Well, they just chop them up and subdivide them. So where they could have raised a barn, they'll build, 2 houses to put next to each other. So, also, 100 yards away, it could be this clear area, and they'll build a couple houses over here too. But that area, that could have been like a slave burial ground. I know there are several instances here in Tennessee where there are slave burial grounds built over in the middle neighborhoods. Hendersonville, Tennessee has one. Brentwood, Tennessee, where, same thing. They have these plantation homes. Sometimes they'll keep the plantation home and make it part of like the business office for the community or whatever, where you go pay your HOA dues or whatever. But the rest of it, they raise the farms. I mean, the barn or the other outbuildings, and that's where they build the houses for the subdivision. So it's not uncommon to find these graveyards kind of in somebody's backyard, or sometimes the graves aren't even marked. Well, like here in Crosby, this Black Oak Plantation, the graves, they're not marked. They're informal burial plots. And they were simply just paved over during all the construction. That's what you see when the cemeteries aren't documented. Well, in the 80s, when people start moving into these houses, these brand new houses, paranormal activity is off the charts. The neighbors kind of got together. Hey, what's going on? I'm seeing this in my house. Oh, I saw it too. They're saying there's the most popular account was there's this tall, imposing male figure they would see. He was wearing like old tattered clothing. He was an African American man. He likely a slave. and he would appear at night in these people's houses. They said that objects would fly off the shelves, cabinet doors would open, the bedroom doors would open and slam violently right in the middle of the night. Lights switching on, lights switching off. They said there'd be like a sudden drop in temperature as all this is going on. Some residents said they couldn't keep their TVs working. Their cars would break down for no reason. Some even got really sick all of a sudden. Well, as this is going on, the local media comes out to investigate, makes the news. They start digging around in their backyards and they find like fragments of coffins, old pine boxes. And it kind of validated the rumors that, hey, this is actually a slave burial ground and y'all built this community right on top of it. So I'm not really sure what happened. It was in the news, and I'm not sure I think it brought in some priests. I'm not sure the activity is still going on, but I know back years ago it was a big thing. And in Crosby, where all these people were freaking out because they were getting sick and all this wild stuff's going on in their house. So yeah, the Black Hill Plantation, there's still something going on there with the African American slave burial ground. So I mentioned this last week. This is one of the weirdest, wildest true crime stories I think I've ever found. So June 1965, there's a nice neighborhood in Houston called Cherryhurst. Well, the bodies of Fred and Edwina Rogers, Fred's 81 years old, Edwina, his wife, is 79. They were found stuffed into a refrigerator. So Fred had been bludgeoned with a hammer, and Edwina, she'd been shot multiple times. Someone broke into their house, they beat Fred, they shot Edwina, and they stuffed them into the refrigerator. So the police descend upon the scene, trying to figure out what's going on. Well, they try to reach their son, Charles. Charles is a highly intelligent geophysicist who lived in the house. But he lived in the house, but he was separate from his parents. No one really knows what happened, but he didn't really talk to them. He would communicate. He would leave notes and slide them under his door to talk to him. He kept to himself. He wouldn't even talk to his parents. Well, when Fred and Edwina, when they find them stuffed into the refrigerator, they find that Charles, he comes up missing. So they start digging around, poking around into Charles's background. And, he was a geophysicist. He's a very smart guy. But he also had a background, and he was in the Navy. He was an electronics specialist who worked in highly sensitive fields. And he vanished without a trace. And he was the prime suspect. Well, they found his car at the Houston International Airport, but there's no sign of Charles. Where did he go? So the strange disappearance fueled this wild, decades-long speculation. And over time, this theory kind of emerged. Charles, he was in the Navy. He's a geophysicist. What if he's working for the government? He's a covert government agent who eliminated his parents after they found something they shouldn't have found. So people in Houston, they're kind of buzzing. What's going on? Did this guy really kill his parents? Why did he do it? Hey, he was in the Navy. Oh, he's a geophysicist. Well, what if he was the guy who assassinated President John F. Kennedy in Dallas? Because I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different theories. What if he was the guy who got rid of Kennedy and then the government relocated him? The CIA they got rid of him, they extracted him, they put him somewhere else, they offed him. Who really knows? But Charles's background in electronics and his position in the Navy, it kind of is all the right ingredients for this wild conspiracy theory. And they claim that he was used in the assassination plot. And what's wild is because there's so many theories of JFK, right? There's like the infamous three tramps speculation where figures photographed on the grassy knoll in Dallas shortly after the assassination. They speculate Charles is one of them, and he could have been the shooter. They say that those three guys were later identified, and Rogers wasn't one of them. But still, what if he was one of those guys, or what if he was somewhere else, pulling the trigger? Would it be as part of the plot somehow to frame Lee Harvey Oswald because his connections to the Navy, and he was just so smart? The CIA, he's working with the CIA, and Icebox Murders is kind of like a cover to get him out, get him away, and just put him into hiding. So no one really knows, but still it's kind of fun and wild and weird. This genius just vanishes when his parents get stuffed into a refrigerator. So something else I found, kind of wrapping up. You guys heard about the Houston Batman? This really tickled me because I write books on cryptids and monsters, but they say there was a sighting, this large shadowy figure. He was like a humanoid, man-like figure with large bat-like wings attached to his back. And the sighting, it took place late one night. It was in June 1953 in the Houston Heights neighborhood. 3 people were sitting on a porch on East 3rd Street. A young housewife named Hilda Walker and her neighbors, Judy Meyer and Howard Phillips. They saw this large shadowy figure moving across the lawn, which seemed to bounce up into a nearby pecan tree. It perched on a branch. Like I said, it was almost 7 feet tall. These large black wings attached to its back. And they say it was wearing like a tight black gray outfit. Like, was this some kind of superhero? I don't really know. But the most bizarre detail was the figure was surrounded by this strange ethereal yellow glow. One of the people there saw it said it was like a dull gray glow. The witnesses said that they stood there for like 30 seconds, kind of frozen, stunned silence. I know I wouldn't really know what to do or what to say. And they kind of watched the creature just kind of stand there and sway on the branch like it was just watching them. Well, they said the glow began to fade and the figure vanished with a loud swoosh over the housetops, immediately like a flash of white light. One of them said it was like described like a torpedo-shaped object or like a jet was seen rising from another tree and just taking off into the sky. Hilda Walker, one of the witnesses, she was so shaken she filed a police report the next morning. The story quickly became a local sensation, running into the local paper, Houston Chronicle. They had the headlines, "Unearthly Batman Terrifies Watchers." So, that sold some newspapers that day. They probably ran out. And there was some speculation. Maybe there was like a UFO connection. A torpedo-shaped object, could have been a flying saucer. Who knows? But still, what's really kind of sad about this whole thing, the exact location of where the Houston Batman was seen, it's gone. As Houston grew, they developed I-10 there, the Katy Freeway. Well, that's now where those houses were who saw the Houston Batman. But they say that in the 1990s, there were some more sightings of employees of the Bel Air Theater. They saw a gigantic helmeted man crouching on a rooftop downtown. So maybe that was the Batman. I don't really know. But still, it's kind of fun, kind of wild and weird. This creature is out there, or may still be out there. Who knows? Could have been a UFO. I don't really know what it is. But anyway, hey, Christmas is right around the corner. And Monster City Madhouse. Every day is Halloween there, 24/7. They specialize in premium Halloween and classic horror shirts with a vintage look. Save 10%. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. It's monstercitymadhouse.com. Get you a shirt, throw it in a box, wrap it up, stick it under the tree. Someone's going to be really happy with you on Christmas morning. Also, Hexed, my voodoo novel, 1940s Knoxville. Stick it in someone's stocking. Someone's going to be really happy with you. Also, all my books, Southern Ghost Stories, The Fear and Folklore, anything I write, it's on Amazon Kindle. It's on the Audible. You can find it online. There's ways to Kindle Unlimited. You can read everything for free. The Amazon Premiere, Audible Premiere, you can listen to everything for free. But yeah, and also the podcast. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a review. Please subscribe. I'm going to be doing these twice a week now. So lots more ghost stories coming up. Also, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Southern Ghost Stories, you can find us there. Leave me some questions. I want to do some Q&As for you guys here, probably in January. But next week, I got a really fun show. And, the stories about spiritualism back in the early 20th century, late 19th century. One of my favorite topics, or my favorite characters from this time period. I'm going to do a show on him, Jules Wallace. I'm telling you, you're not going to want to miss this one. I even wrote a book about the guy because he's so spectacular and over the top. He's the most clever, cunning individual I've ever researched in all my books I've ever done. So, yeah, check back next week. Got some weird wild stuff. Jules Wallace, the great life reader. You're going to love this one. See you then.